Welcome back to the Workshop Therapy Podcast. I'm your host, Andrew, and today we're going to do things a little different than normal. It's been a while since I did a research update, and I thought it was time to explore a complex topic that impacts millions around the world: depression. Today, we're going to do a little unpacking of how depression manifests in different ways and how it intersects with other conditions like mood disorders and ADHD, and a little bit of creativity as well. Given the breadth and depth of this particular topic, we're only going to scratch the surface, and because it is a broad and deep topic, I decided to script this one out. So it is a little bit on the scripted side today, but rest assured, hopefully you'll get something out of it. So if you enjoy this one, let me know. And if you feel any of these aspects apply to you, don't hesitate to reach out to me or a mental health provider in your area. You can even try a free trial of BetterHealth, which is linked in the show notes. And so without any further procrastination, let's dive in. Depression affects many people in different ways, showing up in their emotions, thoughts, and even physical health. One area where depression has a noticeable impact is sleep, which may surprise some people. Sleep disturbances can actually be one of the earliest signs that someone is struggling with depression. Specifically, depression can change how we experience REM sleep. REM stands for rapid eye movement, and it's a stage of sleep that happens multiple times throughout the night. During REM, our brains are very active, and even though our bodies are at rest, it's the time when most of our dreaming happens, and it's important for processing emotions and memories. In fact, REM sleep plays a key role in helping us wake up feeling mentally refreshed and emotionally balanced. Normally, it takes a while to enter REM stage after we fall asleep, but research shows that people with depression often enter this phase much more quickly than usual. They also tend to have more REM activity during the night, which can leave them feeling less rested when they wake up. These changes in REM sleep are important because they can serve as early warning signs of depression. By monitoring sleep patterns, like how quickly someone enters REM sleep or how much REM activity they have, doctors and therapists can sometimes catch depressive symptoms before they fully develop. This early detection could allow for treatment to begin sooner, helping to prevent depression from worsening or giving a chance for quicker recovery. In short, REM sleep is vital for emotional well-being, and disturbances in this stage could be an important clue to when it comes to diagnosing and treating depression. Depression isn't just about feeling sad or hopeless, although those are the common emotions people experience. It also affects how we think and function day to day, which is often overlooked. Beyond sleep problems, depression can also cause changes in the way we think and process information, and that's just as important to understand. For instance, people with depression often struggle with things like concentrating, making decisions, and even caring about the things they used to enjoy. You might notice that someone who was once very engaged in their hobbies or social life suddenly loses interest or has trouble following simple tasks. These changes are called cognitive symptoms, meaning they affect how a person's brain works and handles the information. A study using iPads to observe patients with chronic health issues showed that many of them had clear signs of depression. The interesting part? Even though these patients were found to have depression through formal screening, it wasn't always obvious just by talking to them. They didn't always come out and say they were feeling sad or hopeless. This shows how tricky depression can be, and it doesn't always present itself in an obvious way during regular conversations. Sometimes it's more about what someone isn't saying or how they're behaving, rather than what they actually express with their words. For example, someone might not talk about feeling sad, but they might show signs of depression by withdrawing from activities, avoiding social interactions, or struggling to make simple decisions. This variation makes it harder to spot depression just by talking to someone, but it is important to be aware of these subtler signs, especially in people with chronic illnesses who might not openly express their emotional state. In short, depression can affect people in more ways than just sadness. It impacts thinking, decision-making, and even how people act in social settings, which can sometimes be just as telling as what they say directly. Now, let's dive into some of the more complicated symptoms of depression, like irritability, anxiety, and agitation. These can be just as challenging as sadness or hopelessness, but they often don't get as much attention. It's important to understand that not everyone with depression experiences just low energy or sadness. Some people also feel restless, easily annoyed, or on edge. This can be especially true for people experiencing what's called mixed depression. In mixed depression, a person has both depressive symptoms like sadness or hopelessness and symptoms of mania, which may include feeling overly energized, impulsive, or agitated. It's kind of like having two opposite states of mind happening at the same time. This combination can make it really hard to treat because the symptoms are pulling in different directions. When people with depression show signs of irritability, agitation, feeling restless or fidgety, and anxiety, it often means their condition is more severe. These symptoms can lead to poorer outcomes when they're not recognized and managed early. For example, someone who is very irritable might have trouble with relationships or work, making it harder for them to recover or cope. Research shows that these symptoms, especially agitation and irritability, are really common in cases of mixed depression, and they can make depression harder to treat because they add extra layers of complexity. If doctors or therapists don't notice these signs early on, the treatment may not be as effective. That's why it's so important to recognize when irritability or anxiety is a part of someone's depression, as it often requires a more tailored approach to treatment. In short, while we usually think of depression as causing sadness and low energy, it's important to remember that for some people it also brings feelings of restlessness, irritability, and anxiety. These symptoms can make the depression harder to manage, but with the right approach, they can be treated effectively. Now, when we talk about depression, one interesting area that often comes up is its connection with creativity. It seems that many artists and creative people, like writers, musicians, they're more likely to experience mood disorders like depression compared to the general population. In fact, research suggests that mood disorders are 8 to 10 times more common among creative individuals than the average person. It's not just depression that affects creative people. Many artists also deal with conditions like bipolar disorder, which involves extreme mood swings with high energy and deep lows. On the other hand, these mental health challenges can effectively fuel creative expression by lowering social inhibitions, allowing people to express themselves more freely. This is why some of the most famous works of art, music, or literature were created during intense emotional periods. On the other hand, these disorders can seriously affect someone's mental health and quality of life, making it crucial to provide specialized mental support for those in creative fields or with creative hobbies. Now, let's bring the role of social media into this. In recent years, research has shown a strong link between heavy social media use and the rise of depressive symptoms. A lot of time spent on social media can lead to problems like online bullying for younger people or even adults sometimes, poor sleep, low self-esteem, and negative body image, all of which contribute to increased anxiety and depression. For example, many people feel the pressure to present the perfect version of themselves on social media. This creates a toxic cycle of comparison where users compare their own lives to carefully edited and filtered images of others. Seeing everyone else's seemingly perfect lives can lead to feelings of inadequacy, where people feel like they just don't measure up, which can be a big trigger for depression. Interesting, while social media can contribute to depression, it can also be a way to identify and help people who might be struggling. Studies show that doctors and mental health professionals should pay attention to how people use social media. Patterns of excessive use, for example, could be a sign of depression or anxiety. This dual role of social media, where it can be both a harm and help to mental health, but also a tool for spotting risk, highlights the need for balance. Professionals suggest that we should encourage healthy, positive use of social media, but steer people away from problematic patterns like excessive use that could make their mental health worse. It's also worth noting that people who spend more time on social media, the worse the effect seems to get. One study found that the number of hours in high school students spent on social media was directly linked with higher scores on depression tests. This is also true for older teens and young adults who get caught up in the endless scrolling and comparing themselves to others. The pressure to live up to lifestyles of influencers or celebrities can make people feel like they're not good enough, which only worsens the feelings of depression. In summary, both creativity and social media are linked to mental health in complex ways. For creative individuals, depression and other mood disorders can both fuel their work and harm their well-being. Meanwhile, social media can be both a risk factor for depression and a potential tool for identifying those who need help. In both cases, it's essential for people to be aware of the risks and for mental health professionals to provide the support they need to navigate these challenges. Now, finally, let's talk about the connection between ADHD and depression. People who have ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, are much more likely to experience depression compared to those who don't. In fact, studies show that between 40 and 46% of adults with ADHD also suffer from depression. To put this in perspective, the rate of depression in the general population is only about 16%, meaning that depression is far more common among people with ADHD. Why is this important? Well, for many people with ADHD, the symptoms, like difficulty focusing, feeling restless, or being easily distracted, can create a lot of stress and frustration over time. This can lead to feelings of sadness, hopelessness, and even depression. What's really interesting is that some cases, depression may stick around for so long that it overshadows the underlying ADHD, which may not be diagnosed right away. This is why it's crucial for doctors and mental health professionals to look at the full picture and not just one set of symptoms. For example, someone might be treated for depression but still struggle with focus and motivation because the underlying ADHD hasn't been addressed. That's why thorough evaluations are essential, especially for people in more vulnerable situations. Research has shown that rates for both ADHD and depression are even higher in prison populations, which makes it especially important to identify and treat both conditions in those environments. So, those of you who are in prison listening to this, talk to your mental health providers. In short, ADHD and depression often go hand in hand. If someone has both, it can make life even more challenging. That's why it's so important for healthcare providers to recognize the signs of both conditions and treat them together, instead of just focusing on one piece of the puzzle. So, to wrap up today's episode, it's clear that depression is not a one-size-fits-all condition. Its emotional, cognitive, and physical symptoms can vary widely from person to person, and factors like sleep patterns, irritability, comorbid conditions like ADHD, and even creativity play a significant role in how depression is experienced and treated. Accurate diagnosis and tailored interventions are essential for managing depression effectively, and innovative assessment tools will help us continue to learn a little bit more. Thank you for tuning into this episode of the Workshop Therapy Podcast. If you found today's discussion helpful, please subscribe, leave a review, follow, share this episode with someone who might benefit. And one more thing, I just want to say thank you to the patrons. In the vast and often perplexing cosmos of podcasts, it can sometimes feel like you're just another listener floating through the infinite sea of voices, ideas, and well-meaning banter. But here's the thing, much like a certain famous hitchhiker who forgot his towel, you're not just any ordinary traveler. You're one of the special few who knows that the key to truly understanding the meaning of life, the universe, and everything might just lie within a particularly insightful podcast, the Workshop Therapy Podcast. And let's face it, having that knowledge is far more useful than knowing that the answer is just 42. Now, if you've been enjoying our deep dives into the wonders of mental health, creativity, and all things slightly absurd yet incredibly profound, you might be wondering, how can I keep this intergalactic mental health ship afloat? How can I ensure these conversations continue their journey across the stars? Well, dear listener, we have just the thing for you, our Patreon. Much like the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, it's a beacon of hope in a sometimes confusing universe. By joining our Patreon, you not only gain access to bonus content, behind-the-scenes misadventures, and maybe even few particularly insightful cups of digital tea, but you will also be directly supporting the show. Your support helps us keep the mics on, the guests coming, and, more importantly, ensure that we're providing you with the tools to navigate this often bizarre universe of emotions and experiences with a sense of humor, grace, and maybe just a smidgen of galactic-level wisdom. So, whether you're a don't panic kind of person or someone who always keeps their towel handy, we'd love for you to be a part of the Workshop Therapy Podcast journey. Head over to our Patreon, choose a tier, and let's continue exploring the infinite wonders of the mind together. Oh, and if you're wondering if there's a special bonus for signing up today, well, we're not saying that you'll find the answer to the ultimate question of life, the universe, and existence itself, but we're also not saying that. So join us, support the podcast, and remember, the podcast is the most remarkable device ever invented to help soothe your soul. And now, dear listeners, we must take a moment to give a very special galactic-sized thank you to the illustrious founding fathers of the Workshop Therapy Podcast. These fine individuals are not just supporters, they are the celestial architects who helped build this ship and launch it into the podcasting cosmos. First, we must tip our metaphorical hats, or towels as it were, to the master craftsman himself, Mr. Argiano Serio. Without him, well, let's just say the universe would be lacking in some serious style and substance. Next up, Brad of Brad's Customs, the man who has the ability to take the ordinary and transform it into the extraordinary. Much like the pan-galactic Gargle Blaster, his creations leave a lasting impression, though with far less dizziness. Then, there's Keith Drennan of Blackthorn Concepts, a visionary whose ideas are as sharp and dynamic as the tools he makes. If creativity were a galaxy, Keith would be the supernova at its center. Eric of Overall Makerworks, the man who doesn't just make things, but make things happen. His work is vast and multifaceted as the Milky Way itself. Thank you for your unwavering support and overall awesomeness. Brandon Millichamp of Tectonic Creations, your contributions are as integral to this podcast as a towel is to an intergalactic hitchhiking. We thank you for always being ready with a kind word and perhaps a helping hand. At last, but certainly not least, we must bow in respect to the great Grant Alexander, a man whose name alone could serve as the title of an epic space opera. Thank you, Grant, for your enduring generosity and leadership in the community of makers. So, to you, Mr. Argiano Serio, Brad of Brad's Customs, Keith Drennan of Blackthorn Concepts, Eric of Overall Makerworks, Brandon Millichamp of Tectonic Creations, and the Grant Alexander, thank you. Your support is the heart of gold that keeps this ship moving ever forward. And if you want to join our Patreon with these great people, please do so. And if you have any questions, feel free to send them to questions@workshoptherapypodcast.com. Also, if you want your mental health to be feeling better, you should also read The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. That'll make you feel good any day. Thanks for listening.